Blog Talk Radio.
Greetings, everybody. This is M. John Allen. We have an exciting show for you tonight. Part one of my interview with the conductor on the Freedom Train. And this is a pre-recorded interview, and we will have part two of this interview next week at this same time. The following is an Ambassador Foundation production. Welcome to the Ambassador for World Peace program with M. John Allen. Each week we bring you the solutions to this world's problems and the good news of the world tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, here is M. John Allen. Well, hello everybody. We have a very special guest here on the program today. She wants to be referred to as the conductor on the Freedom Train. So how are you doing, Ms. Conductor?
Oh, I'm doing very well. And yourself?
Oh, I'm just fine. It's the material we have to bring to us today is quite interesting. But why don't you tell me?
You sound a little dubious. That word "interesting" has a lot of implications. Yes, it is interesting.
Okay. Well, I'm not dubious. I'm just saying that we have some interesting things to bring out today. And why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and, oh, by the way, let me introduce this by saying that Ms. Conductor has discovered a process that will finally bring about the status of American national sovereign. There is a lot of patriot nonsense out there that you will see out on the internet, that you'll see in meetings with various gurus, etc. And let me tell you that this is something totally different. This is something totally different, totally unique, and I'm going to allow our Freedom Conductor here to tell us a little bit about her background and then how she discovered this process.
Well, my background is probably identical to many, many other folks out there who have tried to live it the way they were raised to live it and then found out that for reasons that they couldn't comprehend, the government minions are not cooperating. They're saying, well, you've done this, you haven't done that, you have sins of omission and sins of commission, and now you must pay the penalty for your sins. And I'm no different than the rest of the people out there. I started right where they are.
Right, and what kind of sins can we talk about? Are we talking about the kidnapping of people's children? Are we talking about taxes? Are we talking about forced inoculations of children against the parents' will? Are we talking about all of this and more?
Well, in my particular case, it started off with tax issues, which is very common. But most of the issues that you have just brought up are affected by a change of status, change of political status. Most people aren't aware that they were born not having a designated political status. They were born as a national. If they were born in the United States, they were born as a national in the state, the republic, actually, in which they were born. And they had no particular status. The status that they hold today that obligates them and puts them under the jurisdiction of all the various governments is a status that they volunteered for.
Okay. So, but how did they volunteer?
They volunteered as a result of misinformation, disinformation, deliberate omission of information, and coercion in various ways and methods that government uses to convince you that you have to volunteer for the status, because once you have volunteered, it remains a presumption of law until you change that presumption, until you challenge that presumption. It remains a presumption that you are obligated, or the technical legal term is under a bond of obligation, to governments to do as you're told.
Right. But I mean, for example, some of the gurus, they say your birth certificate, your marriage license, your even the signature card on your bank account helps put you into this alternative universe of, it's like a political Alice in Wonderland. So are those the documents that put you into it? Are there more?
There are many different documents. Everything that anyone signs is a contract. They don't see it that way. They're not taught that. So they don't realize that when they sign their name, they're signing one form or another of a contract, and that creates a presumed obligation.
Okay. But the birth certificate is like the first piece of paper, right, in this paper trap?
Exactly. However, the birth certificate is signed by the mother.
Mm-hmm.
And to put it brutally, mother, unknowingly, is signing her child into slavery.
Right. I think you told me one time that a child that has their mother basically sign them into slavery like this can opt out of the system after they turn 18, but they are never informed of this?
This is another one of the instances of the many, many instances of disinformation or omission of information. You cannot act about something, on something, that you've never been told exists. There is a window of opportunity which has to be there because government has to adhere to the law. They have to remain legal. And let me make a point here. Contrary to what many people want to believe, government remains legal just about 100% of the time.
So
they afford that window of opportunity. The law doesn't say that they have to stop the 17-year and 6-month-old young fellow who's just about to graduate from high school and spend an hour in a private room educating him that he has the opportunity to opt out of the US citizen status. No law says they have to do that. It simply says that it has to be made available, and it is available, but you have to find it.
Okay. And you've been on the trail to find all these little nuances for quite a long time, haven't you?
Yes, I have. I like to think of them as dots that you must connect. And the dots are sort of hidden in a visual maze. And it's you find a dot and you say, oh, I have the answer. I found the key. But what you don't realize is that dot is connected to another dot that you just haven't seen yet. And until you get them all connected, you're not going to see the whole picture.
Okay. But you know, how did all this get started? How did we go from becoming a free nation, a free republic, into becoming like slaves on some kind of plantation somewhere?
I don't really understand your question. What do you mean? How did we do it? We did it voluntarily.
Okay.
It is, if you will, a setup.
Right. But what I was asking you for are the historical roots of this whole thing.
The historical roots, believe it or not, go back beyond. It was being put in place, the building blocks for the structure were being put in place as far back as the Treaty of Paris in the late 1890s. Okay,
and what did the Treaty of Paris say? You haven't mentioned that to me before.
It deals with it's very complex, it deals with the territories and possessions, the lands that are conquered or bought and paid for by the United States. And as you probably must know, if you stop and think about it, anyone who happens to reside, an inhabitant of a land that is conquered by a superior power, or the land on which they reside is bought and paid for, they go with the land. and they are quite literally slaves.
So another
They are under the complete and absolute jurisdiction of Congress of the United States. Congress is their God. Congress makes the rules, the regulations, and they must adhere to them or they will be punished.
Okay. But I thought this went back further, even to the 14th Amendment and the end of the Civil War.
That's true. There are dots that are connected back as far as the 14th Amendment citizen, because we are all presumed to be 14th Amendment citizens were territorial insular possession citizens. They were given the status of the territorial insular possession citizens, which isn't really much of a status because they don't have rights. That's very well obscured, but it's fact. They don't have rights. 14th Amendment citizens didn't have rights. The only right that they were given was the right to reside within the United States.
Right, and within several of the states. And this had something to do with the fact that some of the southern states didn't want to give citizenship to the former slaves. Is that correct?
I think it had more to do with creating a condition, using the option that arose with the confusion and the time of turmoil right at the end of the Civil War. It was used as the opportunity to set up a condition whereby the chain of illusion could be started, and people could be taken in under the umbrella of being 14th Amendment citizens.
Right.
Once you have taken the status, adopted the status of 14th Amendment citizen, you have waived your rights under the Constitution for the small u, small s, United States of America.
Right. And what are these 14th Amendment citizens of?
They are technically, they are the same as the citizens of the insular possessions and the territories that are owned and controlled by the Congress of the United States.
Okay. But, you know, some of the information out there says that they're actually like citizens of the District of Columbia.
The District of Columbia falls under the same umbrella.
Right. So
most of the research that's been done seems to begin and end with the 10-mile square District of Columbia, and many of the people who talk about this don't seem to realize that the territories and possessions are under the same umbrella as the District of Columbia.
Right, which includes places like Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands, etc.
North Mariana Islands, American Samoa, etc.
Mm-hmm. So they, in other words, what happened is people were duped into giving up their state citizen status. Is that a correct way of putting it? And converting that into a territorial citizen status?
Roughly, yes. That would be in alignment with the facts. Everyone who was born in one of the now 50 states was born a national of the state republic that they were born in.
Right. But
they were a national. They were not a citizen. A citizen is a political status.
Okay. And
don't you remember in Russia back, if you're old enough, I don't know exactly how old you are, you should be able to remember back when the everyone was talking about the red USSR and comrade this and show me your papers, etc.
Mm-hmm.
Well, everyone was a citizen.
Right.
That's a political status.
Right.
If you were born in one of the states, you were not born a citizen. You were born a national.
Okay. Because
it's very, very confusing when you get into the law, because the word citizen used to have value. Now it has been morphed, if you will, so that when you use the word citizen, you're referring to a citizen of the United States, which is a corporation. Capital U, capital S. If you stop and think about it, and you know anything about the language, grammar, you know that anything with a capital is a noun.
Correct.
It is a unit. It is a thing. And capitalized proper nouns mean a thing.
Okay.
When it's a small u and a small s and you say the United States, it means exactly what the words say, States United. And the capitalized word is America. United States of America.
Right.
But if you are a citizen and you have a constitution for the United States, you now have a document that pertains only to the noun, proper noun, United States, which is a thing. It's a cooperation.
Okay, so let me just clarify that, because we've had lots of discussions on this, but our listeners, of course, don't have this background. I just want to clarify one thing. You're saying that there is one Constitution for the Republican United States of America. Of course, that's not Republican Party, but the Republic that was founded has a Constitution for the United States of America, small u, small s, capital A. Mm-hmm. And there is also a different Constitution that looks very much like the other one, that is
except
the United
except
States.
The style page, the heading is different.
Okay, and the heading on
and
that...
there are certain elements within it that are different.
Right, including the 13th Amendment, if I'm not mistaken.
The 13th Amendment was part of the original Constitution, and it was eliminated. There's a statement, very, very true, I forget who made it now, that said if you remove something from the public domain for 2 generations, it effectively disappears. Everyone forgets it.
Right.
And that's what happened with the 13th Amendment.
Well, they in their corporate charter, because actually from discussions that we've had previous to this, the Constitution for the corporate United States is more like a corporate charter, and so they just eliminated the original because they could, and substituted something else. Is that not correct?
Roughly, yes. It isn't similar to a corporate charter. In effect, it is.
Okay, so it is the
president is a CEO of the corporation.
And the Congress is the board of directors, correct?
That would be roughly equivalent, yes.
Okay. So, but from what we're discussing here, this goes back well over 100 years. So there must have been somebody in the background planning all of this and scheming all of this and making it happen.
The plan has been a general overall blanket type of plan that has been opportunistic. There wasn't, I cannot see that there was some kind of a well-defined plan that existed. Excuse me, I've got a problem here with the computer. Hold on. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that.
Yeah, I paused it. Okay, we're going to start again, and I'll tell you now.
Okay. The plan was not well outlined. It wasn't set in concrete. It always has been malleable. It's flexible. It's an opportunistic thing. It heads in the same direction. Generation after generation, it heads in the same general direction. And the opportunities arise to implement more facets of the plan. People like to talk about blacks and whites. This is not something that you can really discuss in black and white. Yes, it happened, and yes, it is very comprehensive, very extensive, and very effective. But it wasn't a hard plan going in. It was a general direction that they wanted to take the country in.
Okay.
The controllers, the little man behind the curtain that controls the puppets.
So you think it was more of a general plan rather than a specific one?
I know it couldn't have been specific.
Okay.
There was no way that anyone, no matter how brilliant they might have been, could have anticipated specific incidents and opportunities that arose with time that took people with different personalities and ideas coming together to create an opportunity whereby more of the general plan could be implemented.
Okay.
Excuse me.
But it seems like this really got going shortly after 1900. A lot of things were happening then, right?
It got going as far as the people are concerned and the people listening to this program. It got going when they began to feel it.
Okay. And how did they begin to feel it?
They began to lose their rights and liberties that they believed that they were entitled to.
Okay.
They began to be controlled. They began to be told what they could and could not do more and more, and it became more and more obvious. And there's a lot of resistance. The tax became heavier and more onerous, and people began to struggle under the burden of the tax. And they began to say, what's happening? This is supposed to be America. It's a free country, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And the answer to that is no.
Not anymore. But I believe we had discussions previously that this really, really got perfected. In other words, the trap was really sort of perfected with Roosevelt's New Deal, right?
Roosevelt's New Deal catapulted. That was an ideal opportunity. It came right after the crash of 1929 and just long enough into the long dry spell that took place after that so that everyone was in a panic, everyone was vulnerable, everybody was scared. And the opportunity was there. The powers that be saw that perfect opportunity and they stepped into the breach and they created the New Deal.
Mm-hmm.
And the New Deal had a price tag that was not attached where anyone could read it at that time. The price tag was hefty.
Right. But that's when they introduced the Social Security number and all that other garbage, right?
Yep. Perfect opportunity, and they took advantage of it.
Right. So
we're here to help you.
Oh, yes. Yeah, we're going to give you cradle-to-grave Social Security now. You're going to have security from the government. And so I guess that must have been the tipping point, with the introduction of the Social Security number. And I think you also said something that's also when the statutory courts were completely replaced by the original courts were replaced by the statutory courts at about that time too, right?
Well, we were brought under commercial law.
Okay.
Laws of commerce, Uniform Commercial Code.
So we were taken away from...
That's when it began. That wasn't the final implementation, but it's when it began. After all, you've got to realize this is all about the money.
Right.
Everything we're talking about is all about the money.
Right.
And the power and the control.
Right, and yet people were still duped into thinking that they were free, even though they'd signed up for Roosevelt's New Deal, and that they basically sold themselves down the river. There was something we talked about in the past about marriage licenses, giving your children to the state. What is it that what are you addressing specifically? Well, this is there's a big uproar now about some of the things in certain states that are being done, especially Oregon is abusive, and there's another few states that are abusive where the social workers go in and basically kidnap people's children away from them, and as I referred to in the beginning of the show, the forced inoculations, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And if I remember correctly, we had a discussion some time ago where you mentioned that the marriage license that you get from the state is basically gives your children to the state. Is that not true? The birth certificate is what gives the state the option to own the child until the child is of legal age, and then the window of opportunity is there for them to opt out, which of course they're never told, so they don't do. But the birth certificate is the ticket to slavery, and it is signed by the mother. But the status is this: you have both mother and father, and the mother, by the way, is the informer,
says so in tiny, tiny little light blue letters right under the line that she signs on the original birth certificate. It says informant.
Oh, really? Okay.
So the mother is the informer. I guess
Okay.
you could say that she's the most important element of the two parents. But both mother and father have slave status. They have both voluntarily contracted into an obligation of bond with the government. And they have bequeathed, this is a legal term, bequeathed their entire estate to the state. Now, what is your entire estate? It's your children.
Okay.
And everything else that you may think you own, or you have been told that you quote-unquote own it. You only own it until the state wants it, and then it's snatched out of your reach and you don't own it anymore, and that applies to real property and everything else up to and including your children. You are only the stipulated caretaker for the state's property. The children belong to the state.
Right, and that's how they can...
And if you don't treat them the way the state minions, agents, believe you should, they take them, and they have every right to. You gave them that right.
Mm-hmm. So if they decide in Massachusetts to say that you can't spank your children anymore, they have a perfect right to do that unless you change your status, correct?
That's correct. You are on record and as having signed under penalty of perjury that you agree to anything they say.
Okay. Now, for example, this question just popped into my mind, so you won't be prepared for it. But let's say that you've already told us that mommy and daddy signed their children into slavery at birth, because now they, I believe at most hospitals, they even give Social Security numbers to the children now, if I remember correctly, in addition to the birth certificates which mommy and daddy sign.
They try to, and they're successful probably 99% of the time.
Right.
Very few people know enough to say no. But legally, if you stand your ground, they cannot force you to sign a piece of paper. That not yet has this nation come to the point where they can literally put a gun at the nape of your neck and say, sign or die.
Mm-hmm.
Outrageous taxes, out-of-control foreign adventures, armed black-suited thugs breaking down your door at 2 a.m., forced vaccinations, stealing your children away from you because some nosy social worker doesn't think you're giving your child proper medical care, or confiscating your apartment building because your tenant was smoking a joint, stealing your house because a greedy developer bribed corrupt local politicians. On and on it goes. It seems to be a never-ending story of woe caused by a government totally out of control. Don't you wish you could simply take it all back? Don't you wish you could tell these bureaucrats to bugger off and mind their own business? Don't you wish you could just stop worrying? Well, now you can. FlyNational.org is a website that tells you how to burn the bonds that bind you. FlyNational.org tells you how to take it all back and get the peace of mind from having absolute rights, just like you thought you had all along, but realize now you don't. Pay a visit to FlyNational.org and get off the slave plane and onto the freedom plane. That's FlyNational.org.
Okay, so as far as when the child is born then, shortly after it's born, it is signed into slavery by its parents, okay? So let's say mommy and daddy discover down the road that, this is a scam, and that they are slaves, and they decide to go into your process and free themselves from slavery, I would imagine that the children will follow them out of slavery, or is there something specific you had to reserve?
You would have to literally reserve your children. You would have to rebut and deny the validity of your signature on the birth certificate.
Okay.
You would have to state the conditions of coercion, fraud, etc., that signature was made under.
Okay.
And you would have to go on record as having reserved your children, taken them out of the control of the state.
Okay.
And you are the children's controller. According to common law, you control your children, you own your children as much as anybody can. Actually, the creator owns the child, but you were the parent. Obviously, the creator selected you to be the controller of the child until he reaches maturity. So taking yourself back under common law, you also, to some extent, take your children with you, but because you have to live in the world of commerce, you're going to have to take this and make it a matter of public record. Okay.
But, so in other words, what would happen, though, if, and again, we haven't prepared this one. This just popped into my mind right now. Let's say that the parents were divorced. I would imagine the custodial parent, if they became an American national, their children would follow with them, regardless of whether the other parent remained in slavery?
If the other parent, the parent that does not have immediate control of the children, let's say mother has control of child, and father is in another state and does not immediately control the child.
Right.
Mother becomes an American national sovereign, and the child, to some extent, goes with her. She would need to preferably obtain the cooperation of the father. If that were not a possibility, then she would need to swear an affidavit that would be created for the occasion, for the incident, the issue, specifically, with specifics, stating that she is claiming sovereignty for the child until his age of maturity.
Okay. So,
after all, she signed, she was the informer.
Okay. So, okay. So that sounds like it's not a problem that is not solvable. You know, this
any problem should be solved whenever humanly possible, and that means if it means sacrificing one's pride and just, you know, being the nicest person that you know, nicest man or woman that you know how to be, you need to do this because this is the right way to resolve problems, is mutually, by common consent.
Mm-hmm. Now, this is certainly a life-changing experience, though. I mean, this is not something that is, you know, that you should do lightly or without education or anything else. It seems to me that, you know, the situation is quite complicated. And, in fact, Ms. Conductor, I think so many people have been dumbed down out there by the system, they may not even understand what an affidavit is. Would you like to explain what an affidavit is?
I never thought of that. I guess you're probably
but
right.
I think,
people
you know,
don't
people
know
hear
what an
the word
affidavit is.
affidavit, they probably don't even know what it is.
Well, an affidavit is simply, there are three kinds of testimony in commercial law. There is the deposition, and this is where you go into a room and you have a court recorder who sits there and takes down every word, identifies each person, takes down every word that's spoken, and makes a transcript, a record, legal record, of everything that passed during this testimony. That's called a deposition.
Okay.
The second kind, and most commonly understood kind of testimony, is the kind you see on television, where someone gets up on the podium and sits down in the chair, stands up and puts their right hand up and puts their left hand on the Bible, or vice versa. I don't exactly know which way it is. And I should, if I stop and think about it. Forgive me for that little omission. And they swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and all that. And they are asked questions, and they answer those questions, presumably, truthfully.
Okay.
And the third kind of testimony, which is just as valid, is an affidavit. And where you sit down with a pencil and a piece of paper, and you write facts, and you swear that they're true. And you sign it. You swear it in front of a notary. And then you go through the process of documenting it as a matter of best evidence, matter of record, public record. And then it stands until someone else, let's say your opponent, if you want to, assuming you have an opponent in this issue and you are swearing an affidavit to get the facts into the light, the opponent must come forward and he must rebut every single statement of fact and truth that you have written down, and he must prove with documentation that you are lying.
Okay.
This is why it's called an affidavit of fact and truth. And it stands until rebutted.
Okay. And what exactly are you saying is fact and truth in this process?
Whatever is fact and truth.
Okay.
Where were you born? Write it down. That's a fact.
Okay.
What was the name that was given to you at birth? Write it down. That's a fact.
Okay.
What was your status when you were born?
Well,
That of, if you were born in the state of New Jersey, you would be a New Jerseyan, and that is the legal way it is written and spelled, New Jerseyan national. And you write it down. That's a fact. Can they come back and say it's a lie? I don't think so.
right. And you also put other things into the affidavit as well about how you were basically signing into their system under false pretenses, correct?
You outline the conditions under which you were coerced and convinced that you must sign an SS-5, which is the Social Security application, and of course you're voluntarily signing it. And you outline these conditions, how it happened, where you were at the time, and the fact that no disclosure was made to you. Nobody told you that there were adherent conditions that you were agreeing to. They told you that it was an insurance policy that would take care of you in your old age. Nothing more was mentioned. You simply state these facts.
Right. Okay. Now you said a word there that some of the gurus have made something of, and other people may miss it entirely. You said when you sign the SS-5 for the Social Security, it had adherent conditions to it, which means that it was an adhesion contract under Admiralty law, correct?
It is a contract under Admiralty law, absolutely, except that it lacks certain conditions that make it a true contract. There's only one signatory.
Okay.
That's one condition.
Is that
the fact that it was created under false misrepresentation and false conditions?
Mm-hmm. But they didn't disclose everything you were signing.
That's what I said. There was non-disclosure. Non-disclosure creates fraud. Fraud vitiates all contracts. Vitiates means makes as if it never were.
Okay, that's what I was trying to get at. So, since a fraud was perpetrated on you, that allows you to file this affidavit and escape this system. But I think there's something else that we need to bring out here that we haven't mentioned, and that when you sign these contracts, like the Social Security number, the birth certificate, etc., you're actually creating a separate corporate entity, aren't you?
you are treated as a corporate entity because the governments, all of them, municipal, state, county, federal, they are all corporations, and they can only deal with other corporations.
Because
so when you are assigned the Social Security number, you become the same as the corporation which is created by the state, which is assigned a number. Technically, yes. And you are now a corporation, and you have agreed to be treated as a corporation.
Right. And you are resident in the state because you're actually a citizen of the United States Corporation, or the District of Columbia, whatever you want to call it. Isn't that correct? That's why they call you a resident of the state of so-and-so?
Correct.
You're no longer a citizen of that state until you declare your sovereign status again through the affidavit, correct?
You are never a citizen if you're a free man. Citizens aren't free.
Oh, okay. So in other words, when these gurus go around and they say, "Oh, well, I'm a sovereign citizen," that
pains me, seriously pains me when I hear this, because that is an oxymoron.
Right. You can't.
You notice my pronunciation there, oxymoron.
Yes. I mean, but I did want to bring that up because sovereign citizen is self-contradictory. Is that not right?
That's correct.
Okay. So these people that are
you
going...
You cannot be a citizen and be sovereign at the same time.
So they're actually saying something that's nonsensical.
Correct.
Okay. And
only because they don't understand. I'm not saying that any of these leaders of the resistance here are necessarily being devious. In some cases, I wonder, but in other cases, I believe that they are absolutely sincere. They just have not found all the dots in the maze, and they haven't connected them.
Right.
And they are not open to input that comes from outside them. If they don't come to these conclusions themselves, they will not accept someone else trying to point them in another direction. They're very, very resistant.
Well, because of they have a certain degree of egomania, I think, don't they?
Well, they have found something that is bringing them in most cases, money. And they're selling a belief. They're selling their own belief. And it's working for them. As far as they're concerned, it's working for them. They have people who worship them, who hang on their every word. That's a big boost for the ego. And also, they have money coming in because people are paying them for their boilerplate paperwork.
Mm-hmm. Now, just so that the audience is aware that you know what you're talking about, you've actually worked with some of these so-called gurus, right?
Yes, I have.
Now, I don't know if you want to do any name dropping or not, but you know,
I'm an American national sovereign. I can say anything I want. I don't have to be politically correct. No one has jurisdiction over me.
Okay.
I don't mind saying names.
Okay. Well, do you want to tell people who you worked for or not?
Well, two of the main people that I worked for as an employee, as a scribe, if you will, more than anything else, was initially Owen Schiff, who is a very sincere man, misguided, incomplete, bombastic, funny, and very sincere, and very wrong. He's in jail.
Right. And some of the other people you worked for also had legal problems. I seem to remember you talking about.
Oh, one of the most intelligent and also very, very sincere man, who is still in jail, and he is due to be released on supervised parole next January, this coming January. His name was Wayne C. Benson, B-E-N-T-S-O-N. Because I say that, I spell it because a lot of people hear the name Benson, and they want to confuse it with a man by the name of Bill Benson, B-E-N-S-O-N, who wrote The Law That Never Was, and they are not the same individual.
Okay.
But Wayne Benson was probably one of the most brilliant, sincere men, and he was close. He was very, very close. He had a lot of the elements, but he hadn't put them all together just yet. And he gave the system a really hard time for a long time, and that's why he is where he is today.
Okay. And so in other words, if you have just one little chink in your armor, just a little bit that isn't correct, you could end up going down the river.
Yes.
So, okay, so you worked with some of these people for years on a close basis, so you had access to some of the research they did, but what put the pieces together for you? I mean, do you have a legal background of some kind, or?
I've been to law classes, bankruptcy law, basic law, procedural law, and so forth. No, I don't really have a legal background in the normal sense of the word. I'm not an attorney. Wouldn't want to be one, really.
Right, I was going to say you wouldn't want to be.
You make agreements over and above being a U.S. citizen. You also have contractual obligations as a member of the bar, and I wouldn't want those obligations. However, I mostly got where I am because I kept seeing people lose and lose and lose and lose and lose and lose. Nobody won long term. The most they got was a stay of execution. And I learned through observation that the Internal Revenue Service and most other federal agencies follow right along in the same line, are very, very slow. There's an old quotation that the wheels of justice grind slowly but grind exceedingly fine. And I thought of that, not that this is, yes, it is justice. I take that back. I was about to say that not that this is justice, but it is actually, because you have contracted and you're welching on your contract when you say, I don't want to pay my taxes now. I've changed my mind. I don't like this contract and I don't want to pay my taxes anymore. Well, guess what? The government's right and you're wrong, because you are under that obligation of bond that you volunteered for. So you want to get technical? I know this is going to hurt a lot of people. I mean, it's going to make them feel like they dropped an anvil on their big toe, but they are wrong. The government is right.
Right, because
and I watched people lose and lose and lose. Little issues, big issues, frivolous filing fines, on and on. And I kept saying, there's got to be something I'm missing. Why is everybody losing? They are in the law books up to their armpits. They're spending their days in the law library. They're researching Cornell University on the Internet. They're burning the midnight oil. They're putting together motions and complaints and trying to sue the government and all of this. They're even trying to use the RICO laws. And they're losing and losing and losing. They are missing something. And I started looking for that missing element.
Okay, and how long did it take you to find it?
Knowing that there had to be a missing element, about 9 years.
Wow. So I guess you must have just found little clues here and there.
Yes, when you start changing your, mindset, I guess, and you're not looking at the law and you're saying, well, I've got my rights, Fifth Amendment rights, Seventh Amendment rights, Second Amendment rights, whatever. And your whole platform is your constitutional rights, and you're springing off from there. You're standing on the wrong platform. You've got no business there. You've got no legal right to be there. You waived those rights. And once you take that away, and you say, now let me look at the equation, and I'm not standing on rights anymore that theoretically I have all these rights. I take those rights away, and you look at it, and you say, oh my, things look different.
So this was like You were like Sherlock Holmes for 9 years then.
Well, I wouldn't glamorize myself that far. You know, I had a lot of other things to do too, and this was kind of interspersed in between. But I was fortunate enough to come into contact with, throughout the years that I worked for, especially worked for Mr. Benson, I came in contact with some excellent researchers that were not hidebound, that were not narrow-minded, that were open to new thoughts and new ideas. And I was fortunate. I was blessed.
Mm-hmm. So you had to pull together information from a very wide variety of sources, and all from your unique background, because you seem to be the only person. I guess I shouldn't use the word person because you're not a person anymore. If you want to go into that, you can. But you were the only. What should we refer to you as? Since we can't call, because a person is a legal fiction, correct?
How about woman?
Okay. You were the only woman that came up with this.
I think other people have come up with it, but they lack the element of procedure.
Okay.
I have seen affidavits that covered just about all of the high points and should have worked, except that they were not formatted. The language was not quite right, but they still should have worked because they had the right terms in there.
Mm-hmm.
And they had the right claims in there. However, the procedure was flawed. And the system, the federal system, municipal system, all of the governments rely on procedure. Procedure is a vital, vital element. And when you are deficient in your procedure, your paperwork, according to law, can be ignored, circular filed.
I see. So in other words, you have to jump through the hoop in exactly the right way.
You have to know where those hoops are, and you have to make sure you get through them and don't leave anything hanging on the edge as you pass either.
Oh dear. Actually, you know, we should get into the other subject I brought up, that you are not a person anymore. You want to explain to people what a person is?
The legal definition of person, which, interestingly, if you read the United Nations Covenant, all 167 pages of it, you will find the term person repeated literally over 100 times.
Okay.
When they're not talking about native sovereign Indians and referencing native sovereign Indians, they're only referencing persons. So you look up the legal definition in Black's Law Dictionary of person, and you will find that a person is a corporation.
Okay. So the fact that so you're in the slave status, you are definitely a corporation. I do remember discussing something with you when you had discovered some of these things in the United Nations Charter, and actually that ties in with the question that we had discussed before. And the question is, how do you know this works?
Because it's working.
Okay. But in the answer to this question you gave previously, you said something about your research in the United Nations Charter, that you found a clue there that wasn't anywhere else.
The United Nations Charter is the only source that anyone has ever been able to find with the help of all of the word searches and computers and law libraries. It is the only definition that exists of the term U.S. citizen. Everybody says you're a U.S. citizen. When you come into this country, then you have a manifest sheet that they want you to check off. You have two boxes, alien and U.S. citizen, one or the other.
Okay.
You have to agree, if you're going to fill out that manifest correctly, according to them, with their options, you have to be either an alien or U.S. citizen, so everybody checks U.S. citizen. But when you go and you ask any faction of government for the definition of U.S. citizen, you get a runaround, and you don't get answers. There is no definition of U.S. citizen. I spent years looking for a definition of U.S. citizen. It's not in the books. It's not in the law. It's not in the codes. It's not to be found. I finally found one. It's in the United Nations Covenant.
And what does it say a U.S. citizen is?
It says that a U.S. citizen is, hold on just a second. I can probably read this to you. Let me look while you're asking other questions, and we'll get back to this because I can.
Back to that one.
Okay, never mind. I have it right here.
Okay.
Thank the Lord for computers. You can find things much more easily. Article 1. This is from the United Nations Covenant. Article 1, Self-Determination, paragraph 9, states, quote, "The people of the United States are free in law and in practice to determine their political status within the structure of the Constitution." And Article 1, Self-Determination, paragraph 12 states, quote, "The United States includes a number of insular areas, each of which is unique and constitutes an integral part of the U.S. political family. Persons born in these areas are U.S. citizens."
Okay.
Persons born in these areas. In other words, once you have volunteered to contract in as a person, cooperation, you are born in these areas and you are now a U.S. citizen.
Okay.
One morphs into the other, and they both exist simultaneously. You are a U.S. person and you are a U.S. citizen. If you deal in any offshore elements, such as you try to go offshore and open a bank account or set up a trust or something like this, you will find the references constantly to U.S. person, U.S. person. U.S. person must report. U.S. person is taxable. U.S. person.
Right.
As a matter of fact, many places around the world now refuse any kind of business from U.S. persons because they're nothing but trouble.
Okay. Now
they don't want their business,
right,
because Big Daddy is right behind them.
Mm-hmm.
They're running down their slaves.
Right. They don't want them to escape from the net.
Right. So if you go offshore and you try to do anything, have a business or a bank account, there's going to be problems adherent to you, tied right to you if you're a U.S. person.
Right. And people have avoided that in the past by forming offshore corporations.
Does it seem sometimes that everything that can go wrong does go wrong? Does it seem that your life is a barrel full of monkeys and you're the monkey? Does the law of attraction work for you in reverse? Well, now you can change your life for the better. You can get what you need now for success in life. Now you can have the life of your dreams starting today. Surf on over to successquest.info for tons of material on how you can succeed in every phase of your life. If you always do what you've always done, you're going to get what you've always gotten. Break free of your rut today by going to successquest.info. Set your foot on the road to success today by going over to successquest.info. You'll be glad you did. You have heard the Ambassador for World Peace program with M. John Allen, sponsored by the Ambassador International Cultural Foundation. For all literature and other resources advertised on this program, please go to our website at ambassadorfoundation.org. That's ambassadorfoundation.org. Please join us next time for the Ambassador for World Peace program. part of this interview will be next week at this same time.